I thought that was a really good gut check game for A&M. And, I mean, the way they responded against Louisiana is exactly how I thought they responded. I think beating Texas the way they did kind of lifted a little bit of pressure off of them.
Hello, everyone. Welcome into TexAgs Rewind, presented by our friends at Specs. Sip and savor your favorite flavors with deals on tequila, mezcal all month long. Yeah, I do it with an accent. By the way, we're in the Rollo Insurance Studio. Nick, your favorite part of the show?
I'm directing traffic back here, David. I'm sorry. My favorite part of the show was definitely, let's see, what's on the rewind today? I'll go JB Moss.
JB Moss. Okay. Let's go to Eric Casares now for his favorite part of the show, because Eric, today's his last show. We'll get into that here in a second. What was your favorite part?
Where Were You segment was probably my favorite part. I think you and Obi had some great things to say.
Where were you? Where were you when you were born, Eric? All right, so we had that on the show. We had Olin Buchanan on the show. We had Ryan Brauninger on the show. Heavy recruiting, but we did get some baseball in there. And, of course, Kendall Rogers, D1 baseball. That and a bag of chips. It's the TexAgs Rewind.
Where were you for the 2012 Alabama game?
I was in Tuscaloosa, Alabama, sitting next to Gabe Bach.
What an amazing day, huh?
It really was. And you know what? Here's what, when it's fourth, I had written a column the week. I mean, this wasn't going out on a limb. I said, hey, if Johnny Manziel plays well in this game, he's going to win the Heisman. And he was great. And I was so frustrated because they let Alabama have a chance. Remember, they scored after Alabama made a run, and they scored on the touchdown pass to Malcolm Kennedy and almost had an interception. And, of course, they overruled it. And then, was it Amari Cooper? Somebody got way behind the defense with like 5 minutes to go, and you're like, what are you doing? The first thing you have to do, and I'm not going to say who the DB was, but he was prone to making those kind of mistakes. And, it turns out to be like a 70-yard touchdown and everything. Just make them use a lot of time, and you're going to win this game. And then boom. But and then with like a minute and a half to go, and they're on the 1 or 2 yard line, I'm thinking, well, there's still enough time to go down there, maybe get a field goal if you. And then DeShazer Everett gets the interception, and you're like, oh, they're going to win this game.
They're going to win this
amazing
freaking game. I've told the story before. I was working at ABC 13. I believe it was the 2:30 game on CBS, and I was preparing for my newscast, and I feel. This is the way I remember it, at least. They won as I was walking on the set. So we had like a TV with it on as I'm like waiting to do my hit. And like.
So you like the weather girl up in Minneapolis or Iowa or wherever
people did comment like you seemed extra giddy that day on the air. Because remember, like when I worked in that role, I had to be kind of like, Texas got their props and U of H got their props and A&M and Baylor was, So I remember vividly like that whole moment, like, oh my God, we're going to win. And then going on the air and just being a babbling idiot where, if I remember correctly, my producer, Joe Gleason, actually, I didn't see the highlights going into it because the game came down to the wire. So I saw it in the studio, but I didn't go over. There was no script. I just ad-libbed. And I remember being on set and just enjoying every second about it and then just doing it on air live.
But, there was more drama than there needed to be. Bertolette missing an extra point, missing some very makeable field goal, and you're like, come on, guys. And they still won. Johnny was amazing.
Yeah, for sure. It's a West Coast team that we don't get to see a lot on TV, so you're kind of limited on your opinion of them before they arrive. But, just digging through their stat sheet, they're hitting 280 as a team. They do almost have 100 home runs, so they definitely have some pop in the lineup. Their pitching staff, at least on paper, is not as impressive as our Aggies, but they can still pitch it for sure. I mean, I think by all accounts, their strength is starting pitching, and if there's one thing that has given A&M kind of a bugaboo, it's been elite starting pitching. I don't think that the Oregon starters are anywhere as close to as elite as, say, a Hagen Smith or some of those arms that Tennessee ran out. But look, I mean, when you get this deep, Nuno, there's only 16 teams left, and so. Regardless of who you're playing, the other team is going to excel in at least one category. So I think A&M's up for the challenge.
To me, regardless, look, you got to be at your best, obviously, at this point. But the fact that A&M has taken on so many SEC, all the SEC teams minus Kentucky, basically, right? They've been prepared for this moment, yet they're not playing in an SEC team in the Super Regional. To me, that is, I don't want to call it a gift, but you got to beat them, but it sure feels better knowing that the level of competition that Oregon's played is not the same level of competition that A&M has played.
Well, you're spot on. And listen, when I was at Texas A&M, first year in the SEC was my first year in college, and something Rob Childress would tell us all the time is exactly what you're talking about. That's the whole point of going through this 30-game conference grind. If you're able to emerge out of those 30 games and make it to postseason, it should give you supreme confidence, because whether it's regional, super regional, or Omaha, there is nothing that you haven't seen before, given you've gone through the ultimate grind of 30 games of the SEC schedule. So, these guys have seen elite starting pitching. They've seen elite offenses. They've seen it all. So you're exactly right. When it comes to Oregon, with all due respect to Oregon, nothing that they present at Olsen Field at Blue Ball Park is going to be anything that A&M hasn't been through already this year.
So how did Coach Elko's first camp go?
Yeah, I thought it was very well run, very efficient, very organized, just like everything else that we've seen him do. It is different than the Jimbo camps, and we had written articles about it, and that was one of the intriguing things that we were looking forward to this summer. It's obviously not as big of a deal as like the official visitors, which start this week, or even whatever the end of the summer. I think it's going to be a pool party, whatever that looks like. Those are all massive events in the recruiting calendar, but the camps are still important, and I think that there is still a push by this staff to get the best players that they can possible to camp. Now, what my perception is, and it's just one camp, so this may change over the course of the next couple of weeks, is that they were looking primarily at 2026s that they had on their board, right? There was a 2025 safety in from White House, Jarius Sims, who has gotten like real buzz about him as an overall athlete. He's got a decent offer list, but there's a lot of the power programs in the region that are super interested in this kid. He was at camp. There were some really talented 2025s, but for the most part, the kids and prospects that caught our attention were underclassmen. So again, I'm not saying that's going to be a theme for all of these, but maybe it was just for that first one. But that was my takeaways in terms of prospects that made it in. Was there were a couple of 2025s that the Aggies clearly had on their radar and they wanted to see in person. But there were more 2026s and 2027s who either already held offers from Texas A&M or were some of like the most offered players in the state that the Aggie coaching staff wanted to get their eyes on as early as they could this summer.
Yeah, it's kind of funny. People always ask me, like, hey, how do you cover like A&M in Texas and not have a rooting interest? And the thing is like, I know a lot of these kids. I know all these coaches, and like I don't like to see anybody lose a heartbreaker. But for those two teams to play that kind of game, like we talked about it last week, right? Like we knew that if Texas and A&M were going to play, that there is no shot with the way that Texas historically plays in the postseason that they were going to go in that game and at least not be ready against A&M. Now A&M could blow them out by just playing a really good game and hitting a couple of home runs. But you just knew they were going to give A&M their best shot. And you also knew, I think, going into the weekend, that Texas basically had one bullet to play, and if that bullet didn't strike, they were done. And that's kind of how it played out. And so, I give A&M a lot of credit. With Texas putting them on the ropes, LeBaron Johnson, that was the best stuff I've seen from LeBaron all year long. Honestly, if he pitched like that all year long, Texas probably isn't on the road for a regional. He was sensational. And I think the other thing is I was really impressed with the way A&M handled it, because it's very, very easy when you're playing Texas or frankly, any team for that matter, but especially when you're playing your rival at home in a year where everybody expects you to get to Omaha and compete for a national championship. It would be really easy in those moments to just kind of melt down. And A&M didn't melt down. I mean, if anything, they got better as the game went on. Ryan Prager, I thought he was a little rusty early, but Ryan Prager, his best innings were his last few innings. So I thought that was a really good gut check game for A&M. And, I mean, the way they responded against Louisiana is exactly how I thought they responded. I think beating Texas the way they did kind of lifted a little bit of a pressure off of them. And, I mean, I think they play really, really well this weekend, because at this point, I don't think they have a pressure situation.
Eric, before you tell the people what to do, man, I've really enjoyed getting to know you over these last 3 years. You're off to go be a businessman in the Metroplex. Anybody hiring a radio broadcaster / athlete / businessman, go hire Eric Casares. You were telling us your favorite part of the show was when you met Mark Henry. What was the most scary part of working at TexAgs? Was there ever a scary moment like, oh, man, I don't know?
A scary moment? honestly, like, I think there was probably a couple times this year. Like, this year humbled me in terms of preparing for a show. And I think I'm going to take that into my next job, is making sure to always prepare more. And I remember one time you were like, let's go around the SEC. And I had like literally nothing to give you. So it was like a humbling experience. It was really awkward. But after that, I vowed, I was like, I'm going to be prepared next time. And so that was probably my scariest moment, was like just being like unprepared on air one time.
All right, Eric, why don't we do around the SEC now? Go.
Jimbo, I don't know. You did it again.
I did it again. Oops, I did it again. All right, tell the people what to do, Brittany.
Like, subscribe, comment.
You paused.
What did you call me?
Brittany. Because oops, you did it again. Get it?
Yes.
Do you understand the joke or no?
I do understand the joke, yes.
Just making sure.
Like, subscribe, comment, share with a friend, and thank you, TexAgs, for 3 awesome years.
All right, guys, we'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank you, Eric.